and welcome back to Studio Biku. I'm Victoria and this is my studio in Tokyo, Japan. So I've just come back from a trip to the UK where I went to see my mum in Lancashire and spent some time in Cornwall. You may have seen the videos. And I love charity shopping, so shopping in recycle stores, that kind of thing. Thrifting is part of what this channel is about. So I went to my mum's local charity shop and did a little bit of vintage craft shopping. I got an embroidery kit and different things. But I went away and I just happened to come back to where we'd parked the car and saw some more stuff had arrived at the charity shop. So I went and investigated, and it was literally coming in through the door. It hadn't even been priced yet. And I managed to package it up and bring it back to Japan with me. So I'm going to unpackage it today and I'm going to show you what I got. And then I'm going to have to think of some creative ways to display it. So it's wrapped up in a British newspaper, Sunday papers. And it's the only thing I could think of to wrap it in at the time, because this came completely framed and the frame had broken, so the frame was useless actually. I can't even recycle it. Could recycle the wood. So here it is. Now on the back of it, it was backed. It's very dusty, so I'm probably going to start sneezing, but I need to clean this. Really old. What it is wallpaper. See, it's so dusty. You'll see why in a minute, why the dust. This wallpaper is amazing. I'm going to try and find the pattern name because luckily there's a selvage on it. Now I heard from my mum, I'd never heard this before, that back in the day when people were doing wallpapering, it came with a selvage like fabric does today. And the first job was, when you were wallpapering your house, was to cut off the selvage. And my mum says she remembers having to do that job when she was young. And so I thought that was an amazing bit of information. Now this is Crown, made in England. So Crown is still around today, so I might be lucky and find it. So the texture's so gorgeous. Now I nearly threw this away because it did get damaged when I unframed the thing that I bought. But I thought I might be able to keep some of it and make some into some artwork or put in my sketchbook. But it is really fragile and incredibly dirty. This is what I got from now on the back of the frame, which was completely wrecked, I found the original label, and that's so incredible. It says J. Duxbury, picture frame manufacturer and gilder. Every description of frame made to order on the shortest notice. Oil paintings restored, engravings carefully cleaned, regilding a speciality. Auctioneer's picture frames supplied. And it's for Great John Street, Lancaster, late of Penny Street, and stalls at Queen's and West End Markets, Morecambe. So at this point it had been established 25 years. So I'm going to look into that also, that little bit of history, because that was the original framer who framed this piece. Now I think you get a hint of what the piece is, but I couldn't believe it when I found it. I'm going to turn it around so that you can see it in its full glory. And now you can see it is a sampler. And it says in the middle the date. It says E.A. Baggett. I think that's the name, E.A. Baggett, age 14 in 1894. So this was done in 1894. It's amazing that the colours are still as vibrant. Unfortunately, I have had to fold it to bring it back. I couldn't roll it up because I didn't have space. So I'm going to try and steam out very carefully those creases that I put in it, because it had been very carefully framed by the Duxbury Company for well over 100 years, and I had to remove it with these. They had these tiny pins along the side onto a wooden board, so the frame looked like it had fallen off the wall and had completely broken, but it was a hardwood frame. It was so heavy, and the glass inside it so heavy also. They made things to last in those days, and clearly it has. So now I'm going to just press this through, and I'm going to think of a way to display it in the studio. The more I thought about this piece, the more questions that kept popping up. I was curious to know what her name was, because I only knew her first initials, when she was born, where she was born, the names of her parents, and maybe what they do for a living. And I also wanted to know, did she get married? Because as most people do, I assumed that this sampler was something to do with marriage. But in the late Victorian times, as industrialisation was creeping through and sewing machines were being widely used, I found out that samplers didn't have the same cachet as they did in, say, the early 1800s. As I started looking into it, I found out that by the late 1800s, these samplers were not used as dowries anymore. A large sampler like this was more like a showpiece, something for celebrating the end of school, something to show patience, resilience, literacy, and of course virtue. There's often religious symbols on these samplers, and when I looked at mine, I saw that she'd put a lot of Christian crosses, and there's probably, if I look into it, quite a lot of symbolism in the birds and the plants that she also represented. So if this was all about showing your virtue and your skill, then it stands to reason that the families would want to display this in a prominent place in the home to show how much of a good girl you were. So to update you a little bit on the history, I dug into some parish records, some births, marriages and deaths, and also I even popped into the census information, and I found quite a bit of information about the maker of the piece. Her name was Elizabeth Alice Baggett, and I counted backwards from 1894, and I got a birth date of either 1879 or 1880, so I searched for both of those, and I found her. Look. So now we know that her mother was called Hardman, so that's another bit of information for the puzzle. And I also know that she was born in the area of Stalmine, which is close-ish to Lancaster. Then that started to throw up the questions of What was transport like at the time? Did they travel? There weren't any trains. I don't think. There's not a train link between Stelmine and Lancaster. Stelmine is still today quite a rural area, and most people get around by car. So I was wondering, how did this beautiful piece get from Stelmine to Lancaster to be framed by a professional framer in 1894? And indeed, was it actually framed in 1894, or was it framed a little bit later? So I also found out that in 1898, Elizabeth got married to a John Towers, which is a really happy story, that this piece probably travelled with them to their home and lived there for many, many years until it fell into my hands. Finding out who she is just makes the history feel so much more alive. I knew when I saw it that it wasn't just a pretty object, that it felt like something real, some real history behind it. And it really makes me wonder how many other objects are sitting like this in charity shops, recycle shops, that are looking for a forever home. Have you ever found anything like that? I'd love to know. Please leave me a note in the comments and tell me your story. For now, I'm just so glad that I was able to rescue it, even if I did unframe it and bring it all the way across the world to Japan. I wonder what Elizabeth would think of where her piece ended up. She would be amazed, I'm sure, in 1894, as she was stitching patiently away, that it's now in a tiny studio apartment in Tokyo. You may look at this and just think it's a piece of linen with some wool thread woven through it, but it's so much more than that. When you think about it, it's hours of somebody's life spent on this piece. It's maybe her thoughts and dreams woven up into it as she was working. And it's so much more than just the materials that it's made of. Most of us won't leave behind a trace of history in, say, a history book, but we will be leaving behind traces of our history in the things that we make. Crafts are so powerful because they're tangible. They're proof that we've been here, and they connect the generations. This sampler has sat for quite a while unnoticed due to all the dust that I found on it. And now I'm only starting to uncover part of the story of the person behind it. So maybe that's the message, that crafts, no matter how small, will outlive us, and they can tell our stories in ways that we can't even imagine. See you next time.